Broadcasting the information the mainstream media won't touch. This is The Richie Allen Show in association with DavidIke.com.
My next guest should be no stranger to you. She's been on the programme a couple of times before. The British government wants to privatise every school in the country. They're going to do it despite the fact that 97% of parents in Britain who, when asked, said they would prefer to be asked whether or not they wanted their school to be academised. Government's going to do it anyway by 2020. I've said on this programme that I believe it's tyrannical. 2022, I think. I believe it's tyrannical, and I believe that British families are oblivious to what it really means for their children, because the media are certainly not giving them the full picture of what academisation really means. It was sickening for me as a trained journalist, as a presenter and a producer, and I produced award-winning programmes. Sickening to me to watch the daily politics over the last couple of days and to observe the conduct of Joe Coburn and Andrew Neil on those programmes. They know damn well what academisation means for children and for teachers and for communities, but they ain't going there. Sian Bloor is a teacher and a National Union of Teachers representative for Trafford here in Manchester. I'm delighted that she's back on the show. Sian, always good to chat with you. I know you're really busy and it's been a busy old week. Welcome back.
Hi, Rich. It's really good to be here. Lots happened since I last spoke to you, but I think a lot of what we last discussed about the global education reform movement is now fully coming to light, and the cogs are fully in motion. Tell us
about, explain, because I said at the beginning, I'm very mindful of the fact when we talk about things like this, there are people who listen to this programme in the Republic of Ireland, there are people who listen to it in certain parts of America, and the lights go off straight away because it's Richie, that's a uniquely English, uniquely British issue. It isn't, Sian, is it? Nothing like uniquely British. This is happening all over the world.
Yeah, it goes back to, I'll just briefly sort of...
go all the time you want now.
When I was last on and we spoke about the global education reform movement, and it goes back to when the hurricane came to New Orleans in America, Hurricane Katrina, and it decimated the whole of that part of America, and they needed new schools to be built, but they couldn't afford to build them. So their schools were also in trouble. The standards weren't very high, etc., etc. So they decided that they would allow big corporations to set up their own schools in the form of charter schools. So that's what they did. So they have this whole charter education system. So anyone in America will immediately know what I'm talking about. So when the Tory coalition came into power in 2010, Michael Gove, the then education secretary, sent one of his advisors over to New Orleans to have a look at that model of education over there, and they brought it back over here, and then they started rolling out under the name of academisation. So that's kind of the brief history and where it started. So where we've come since then is Michael Gove was mooting right at the very beginning that he wanted all schools to become academies run by private corporations for profit.
And he did say that, by the way. You are not misquoting him. He said that. Now, at the moment, schools are run by the local authority, right?
Yeah.
Why is that a good thing? Explain.
Well, it's more transparent, isn't it? And it's democratic. So schools in an area they're not controlled. This is a bit of a fallacy. We're not controlled by local authorities. They are our support partners. The money at the moment is devolved from Whitehall into the local authority, and then there is a democratically elected group of people containing of parent governors, teachers, teacher bursars, there's head teachers, there's the unions, and we all meet once a term, and we discuss what's happening with schools funding. And it's up to us as a committee, a democratically elected committee, to decide how that pot of money is going to be divided up amongst the schools. I mean, there are certain pots of money that we have to give to schools. So things like pupil premium for children who are in deprived areas, or children who have come from deprived homes and have free school meals. So they're entitled to have extra money. Children who have special educational needs, they're entitled to have extra money. But the rest of it is more or less a standard amount of money that's given per child per year for their education. So that's split up.
And it's transparent, Sian. This is the most important part of all that.
Transparent and democratic, yeah. And the way that the schools at the moment, they work in partnership in Trafford here, as they do in many other counties. They have clusters in their different areas. So, for example, we've got lots of different areas in Trafford. We've got Urmston, we've got Sale, we've got Altrincham, and they all the schools come together in a cluster, and they work collaboratively to help each other and support each other and that's with the support from the local authority. So as the austerity cuts have hit our local authority extremely hard. We've had to cut back about £24 million worth of services this year. So we've lost an awful lot of our school advisors. So those were the experts on the team who would help the schools in raising attainment in their literacy and mathematics, and they were specialists in the particular areas of children's development, such as early years, infants, juniors, and secondary schools. So we've lost all of those people because of the cuts over the last few years. So now, sadly, in Trafford, we're actually only down to probably a team of about 5 people who are there to support schools. But we're doing incredibly well. We've got 94% good and outstanding schools here in Trafford, and that's well above the national average of 86%.
Despite the limited resources you have to work with. So what we're seeing here, and what we have seen is, we've seen a tried and tested strategy by what we call the globalists run down a service deliberately by underfunding it, and causing it, plunging it into absolute misery.
Yeah.
This is David's problem reaction solution thing, because parents start kicking up blue murder then, and then the government comes in and says, well, we've got to change the way we do it then. But what's forgotten then in all the mess, in all the furore, is that central government have caused the problem to begin with. Right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And that's what they do, don't they? If they want to privatize a company, they run it down till there's nothing left, and then that's it.
Doing it to the prisons, doing it to the health service, and doing it to education.
Yeah. I'm just going to read. I'm just trying to get something that came through. It's hot off the press.
Go on.
This is a press release that's due to go out. It's literally hot off, but it's only just come through. I was just reading it whilst I was waiting to come on. And this is with regards to David Cameron's statement in Prime Minister's Question Times today on misleading parents and the public on school funding. So do you want me to just read it out to you? It's
read
not
it
very
out.
long.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Sian, yeah.
So David Cameron at PMQs today said that he was protecting pupil funding. This is hugely misleading to parents and the public. According to the Institute of Fiscal Studies, schools over the next few years in England will lose 8% or more of their real terms funding due to inflation and higher costs. This will be the largest real terms fall in any period since at least the late 1970s. This cut is equivalent to the loss of £1.6 billion from annual school funding, which would be sufficient to employ 31,000 teachers or over 93,000 classroom assistants. So that's a real terms cut.
There you go.
Keep saying that they're ring fencing funding, but they're not, because just wait for this next bit. As a result, parents across the country will see class sizes increase, their subjects cut, and less individual attention for their children. Teachers will see redundancies for many of their colleagues and support staff, which I've done nothing but do redundancies here since September. And a large proportion of the extra costs schools are facing are directly due to the government. Whilst freezing per pupil spending, the government is increasing the amount of money that schools have to pay to the Treasury in form of extra national insurance and pensions contributions. So that's key. That's key to this. So whilst freezing per pupil spending, the government is increasing the amount of money that schools have to pay to the Treasury in the form of extra national insurance and pensions contributions. So they're actually cutting the education budget.
And it's kind of, with the Institute of Fiscal Studies saying that, and any economic policies that this particular government has mooted or has brought forward in recent months, the IFS has come out every single time and said, well, that's basically a load of claptrap. So caught red-handed there, deliberately running down the maintenance of schools through local authorities in order to cause chaos, in order to sell them off. Now, we know that there was a memo leaked to the British media in 2013 when Gove was the Education Secretary, and the memo blatantly talked about chains and privatising schools. And let's dig down into the nuts and bolts of this without in any way getting into scaremongering, but what this really means for children. What I learned about this, when I first came across this, I couldn't believe it because it was so obvious to me. But yet, I don't have any children, and I don't have any children in school. You're the only teacher I know, Sian. So I didn't really, know what was going on with schools. One of the things that I really didn't understand was the term academy trust. Right, so if the local authority is not going to run the schools, well, who's going to run them then? The British government lies, and it lies pathologically, because it says, well, we want head teachers to run them, but of course they don't want head teachers to run them. They want academy trusts to take over schools. Now, these are supposedly going to be charitable companies. Do you want to explain, because you'll do it better than I will, why these academy trusts are absolutely terrifying and how they actually open the door to corporations basically taking control of schools?
Okay, so one of the phrases that keeps coming out of David Cameron and Nicky Morgan at the moment is that the schools can have more autonomy, more freedom to do what they want, to work collaboratively with other schools within their multi-academy trust, and also it will allow the head teachers and teachers to run their own schools as they choose. Okay, right. So let's debunk that myth first of all.
The freedom myth, the freedom myth. Everything is going to be more free and transparent. You'll have more room to manoeuvre. This is nonsense, is it?
This is absolute nonsense. Yeah. So, just going back to what academies are. Academisation means that state schools are being transferred into the control of private organisations. Academy trusts are exempt charities and not fully covered by the provisions of the charity law. They're also companies limited by guarantee. A company limited by guarantee is much like any other private company limited by shares, and it's got to be registered by Companies House. So it's just like any other normal limited company. It's got to file its accounts and an annual return every year. It doesn't have any share capital or shareholders, but instead the members who are akin to shareholders, who are the trustees and governors, again, similar to a company board of directors, and they also have a chief executive. The members appoint and they can dismiss the trustees and the governors. So it's very like, a board, a limited company board. A typical multi-academy trust makes decisions about all the schools in that MAT. We call them MATs for short, so it's multi-academy trust. So they're taken centrally so that schools don't own their own destiny. So you've got the corporation at the top, and then you might have a family of schools underneath it. So you might have, for example, ARC. I think they've got about ARC Academy chain. They've got about 67 schools, something like that.
How many? 67 schools.
Something like that. Yeah, I don't know exactly. I can't remember exactly. I haven't checked that figure. It's in the 60s anyway. So they've got all these schools underneath them. So this structure is typical in the corporate sector. So it's very similar to a major supermarket chain, but alien to the democratic arrangements covering maintained schools, which have democratic local governance and reserved places for staff and parents and local authority representatives. So they want to get rid of all those. They want to get rid of parent governors and council representatives, etc. Now, this is one thing that's been coming up throughout the debate all the time, that Cameron and Nicky Morgan keep saying, we have never said that we want to get to remove parent governors. Well, they did, and it's on page 51 of the white paper. It's there for everybody to see. It actually says that. So
how despairing is it for you as a union member, as a teacher, as somebody with your own children, that a minister, a secretary of state can lie pathologically like that and not be called out by it by any of the mainstream journalists on British television? How disgusting is that?
It is. I have no words. I mean, to be honest, I don't even listen to the news anymore. I don't read the papers anymore. I pick up my own news and information off the internet and alternative media, like yourself. You listen to the people who are on the front line. You talk to people who are there, who are actually experiencing these things, and those are the people that you need to listen to. It's very much the same as what they're doing to the the junior doctors at the moment in the National Health Service. They've spun all these lies about 7-day NHS and about their contracts, and it's all about death, people dying more at weekends and all the rest of it. And it's just all lies. They have all these made up statistics and no evidence.
No evidence. They want to wreck the service. I'm going to read a few tweets now, and then I'm going to put a scenario to you.
Okay.
Betsy or Susie, Miss Betsy on Twitter, Susie's in New Zealand, says that anybody interested in education should be listening to this right now, especially regarding New Zealand's charter schools. That's a great comment. Wayne says armed guards, turnstiles into schools, biometrics, frisking pupils, reduce the levels of competency, staff, etc. Profit. Now, that's a very, very sinister and dark outlook, but I have a lot of sympathy with Wayne's comment. We might come back to that. The future for our children in schools going on to this. Pippa King is listening to the programme. Pippa's been on a few times. She'll be back again in the future talking about biometrics in schools. She's loving this. Sian's a brilliant guest, she says. Just tuned into it. Janie on Twitter says they've been breaking the system down for years, creating failing schools for businesses to rescue. Marco says, oh dear, this is depressing him. Not the subject matter, but what's happening to our society, to our country. Save Our Schools New Zealand, Diane, says that she's on the train and unable to listen, but will listen in later. Shame you can't listen live, Diane. I'm sure you would have had something to say about that, being in New Zealand and obviously being on that issue in New Zealand as well. Let me put this scenario to you, Sian, right? This is maddening me. So I can set up an academy trust if I want, right? I can, and one or two people whom I know.
Yeah.
I can do it.
Anyone can do it.
Anyone can do it. Yeah. I can get a chain of schools, and I can then basically provide services to the school that I'm overseeing in my trust, and then personally charge the school for that.
That's right. Yeah. I'll just give you a couple of examples
Jesus.
locally. So we have quite a small multi-academy trust, but it's very established just within our local area. And he's got about 3 or 4 schools now, and he's spreading his wings out to over to Merseyside and into central Manchester. So he's getting bigger. But this on having a look at the accounts, because anyone can have a look at accounts on the Company's House website. I was having a look at him and the accounts, and his wages are down as being been between 160 to 180,000 a year, plus he gets over £20,000 in pensions contributions. But he's also the director of about 5 other companies, and all of those companies sell services to his schools. So one of them is a football foundation, so they go round and they sell football training for schools, so they'll sell their services for that. He's the director of a couple of different leisure centres where his schools use their services in the leisure centres. So all these different things he can bill for. He also offers his services out to other schools who may be requiring some help, to raise standards, and they notably charge £40,000-50,000 for their services, which is a huge amount of money. So that's just one. And another one that came in the other night, which absolutely gobsmacked me. We've been doing some campaigning around the forced academisation just in our area, and we'd sent an email out around all of the schools asking for head teachers and chairs of governors to put their names to an open letter that we're printing in the local paper. And I got this diatribe back from a chair of governors who was from a local standalone primary academy school. So they're not in a multi-academy trust yet. They've just converted on their own. So I decided to just do a bit of research on who this man was, first of all, before I replied to him. And on putting his name into, I checked him out on the school website and then put his name into Google. And I mean, you just couldn't make it up. You'll never guess what his business was.
Go on.
He owns his own business converting schools to become academies. And you just couldn't make it up.
I want you to repeat that again. Because
he owns his own business, which helps schools to become academies. So it's an academy conversion company. So that's what he does. So he's on the board of trustees of this primary academy school, and that's how he makes his money. And on my own children go to an academy school, and on their board there is a trustee who owns a supply teachers company. So begs the question, I wonder where that school buys all their supply teachers in from.
This is horrendous. JP in Manchester, I've just, no I haven't. Sounds like a prison service, will soon be academy based. No names, just numbers, he says. Pippa King came back to us. Massive hashtag EdTech waiting to corporatise UK education. Sham will know that. Pearson's and Newton monetising our kids' education. Let's talk about Wayne's scenario. These images we see from US schools, you walk in the X-ray gates, let me find that tweet again because it was amazing the way he phrased it, actually, if I can find it. Armed guards, turnstiles into schools, biometrics, of course, which schools, some schools have tried to kind of sneak in Britain, frisking pupils, all of that. Is that what we're looking at, Sian?
It's already happening, Richie. It's already happening in our schools. There was one of my colleagues down in one of the areas near London. I won't name it. She was saying, she posted a photograph of this. What would you call it? It's like one of those things that you go through, like metal detector or X-ray. One of those things you go through and they detect whether you've got knives or anything like that. They just had one of those installed in their school. And kids are using their thumb imprints for getting library services or for their dinners and things like that, so that they can decide what they want for the lunch, and then when they get to the canteen, they just put the thumb on there and it will come up and say what the dinner ladies then know what they want for their lunch.
And you know what, Sian, when it's gone, right? Because we're speaking to our first guest about the TTIP nightmare. So you look at that TTIP nightmare. So you allow every school in the country to be privatised by these lunatics. At no point then in the future, if TTIP comes in, will a democratically elected government in this country be able to do anything? Because they'll be taken to an investor, what do they call them, these investor state settlement dispute tribunals. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely insane.
I'll just tell you a little bit about the land, because this is something that's not been very clear to a lot of people about what happens to these to the school buildings and the land when when they're taken over by these multi-academy trusts. So what happens is the Secretary of State will grant them a lease for 125 years on the buildings and the land, but then what they can do is apply directly to the Secretary of State for a freehold status, which will then allow them to sell the land. It will allow them to do anything they want with that land. So they don't have to go through the local planning department. They don't have to go through the local council or anybody else. They go directly to the Secretary of State for Education, and she can grant them a freehold status on that.
Jesus Christ.
Where I can see this going in the future is, for example, if you have a multi-academy trust and it takes over several small primary schools in an area. There's been a lot of talk about what will happen to schools in rural areas. This has been a sort of a mainstay of the debate from some of the Conservative MPs. That's been their concern. But what's happening in Powys in Wales is something I think that is very realistic. That they'll close down these smaller schools. They'll be able to sell off the land, be able to make profit out of those, and then they will build a super school and they will bus the kids into the super school. And this is already happening in places like Powys, where it's a very rural area in North Wales. So yeah, I can see that happening.
This is straight out of Orwell. And what you're talking about then is you're looking at a scenario where you have all these academies in a chain, and you think, I'll tell you what now, we'll keep Sian Bloor, but we'll get rid of our colleagues, and Sian will teach. And they're bringing in, all the mobile phone companies now are giving virtual reality headsets, aren't they? Yeah. I see them using them. In fact, I was in the pub a couple of weeks ago with Caroline in Manchester, the Friendship Inn on Wilmslow Road, in fact.
Oh, right.
I'm not advertising it now, even though I just did. I'm not advertising anything. We just happened to be in there, and there was a guy across from us, I'd say he was in his 50s, and he could not believe he had one of the latest Samsung devices, and he was using a virtual reality headset. And what I got thinking there was straight away, I thought schools, and I thought you going into a recording studio once or twice a week and giving instructions. I was going to say a lesson, but more like instructions. And they're fitted with their headsets and they're getting that. There you can wipe out thousands of teachers with one kind of swoop of a pen. That's not crazy conspiracy theory. That's reality,
crazy.
Isn't it?
It's not crazy at all, Rich. And it's something that is realistically could happen. Pearson's at the moment are selling something called Schools in a Box. And they're selling it to third world countries for profit. And so it's basically the say schools in Kenya, for example. They sell them all the resources, all the iPads, and you just need one person at the front of the room, just delivering that lesson. So they're not teaching; they're just going through the script that's on the iPad. And this is something, again, that's happening in many of the charter schools over in America. And with this new white paper, indeed, they are saying that they want to get rid of qualified teachers in the class. They want to get rid of qualified teacher status. So at the moment, to become a teacher, you have to do either a 4-year degree or you have to have a 3-year degree and do a postgraduate certification in education to become a teacher. But now they want to get rid of all university-based teacher training, and it will be a 4-year on-the-job training in school where the head teacher will have the sole discretion whether to award you accreditation or not.
This is an outrage. I'm going to read you something. It's 21 minutes to the top of the hour. Sian Bloor is on the line, NUT delegate from Trafford in Greater Manchester. She's a teacher. Teachers are up in arms, folks. Most of the parents in this country, maybe I'm wrong, but I think most of them don't know what's coming down the line because of the tyrannical propaganda media that we have in this country. Michael Rosen from Goldsmiths University wrote this on his Facebook page. Ultimately, writes Michael, for people who view schools as performance factories with performance based on scores for right-wrong answers in tests, the children are not really pupils or learners. They are meat. Good meat and poor quality meat. If you want your butcher's shop to be better than the butcher's down the road, get rid of the poor quality meat. the local authority will come and collect it and give it to the dog meat factory. Rebrand and call yourself the Excellent Butcher. Improve the quality of meat you get from the supplier. Try to make sure no poor quality meat gets into your shop. Take over the supplier, tell them it's for their own good, try to get them to chuck out their poor quality meat. The local authority might be able to give it to the sausage factory. And I'll make this quick. Remember, we are talking about children here, writes Rosen. An academy could decide that a 4-year-old is poor quality. 4 years on Earth, 4 years on Earth, and he or she is already poor quality. Then what? That's terrifying, Sian.
Yeah, but again, it's the reality, and there was news reports from a school in Birmingham just recently who is preparing to become an academy, and they excluded 30 children from their primary school. All of those 30 children were found to have special educational needs.
Not because of bad behaviour or because they were acting out, because they weren't learning quick enough or they weren't clever enough?
Yeah, they had special educational needs.
So get rid of them, basically.
Yeah. So, and this has been reflected in the charter schools in America. You just, go on YouTube and, you can look up charter schools in America, and you'll be able to find examples, and you'll be able to see films on what's happened to the children with learning and physical disabilities. The schools don't want them because they will lower their standards. So they're basically left for their I don't know what's their equivalent of a local authority in America. I don't know what it is. Their school division or whatever. It's just left for them to mop up those children, and they're being very poorly educated in very run-down schools with few resources. I mean, it really is awful. And again, you can see reflections of that, and you can see that happening here at some point. I mean, already, we do have some of the top schools who, the first thing they do, because all they care about is their grades and their performance in the league tables. So if a child in secondary school isn't looking like they're going to get an A or an A star in their GCSEs, they will persuade the parents that that's possibly not the best school for them to be going to, and maybe they should go to the school down the road.
Do you know
that is reality. That does happen. Schools will not admit it. But I know plenty of people who can tell you that has happened to their child.
This is horrifying stuff. Sean Bloor is on the line, 16 and a half minutes to the top of the hour. We've got another 5 or 6 minutes on this. I want to just read a few comments there. Sean McDonald says it's exactly the same plan for the NHS, super hospitals with cottage services locally. Problem, do an audit on transit deaths. DOA, says Sean, dead on arrival. Are they still required to do the C or B checks, asks Janie. Do you want to answer that? I don't know what C or B checks are. Do you know what they are?
Yeah, they call them DBS now. It's just one of these data checks, to make sure that people haven't got any, they're not on the sex offenders register, and they've not got any police records or anything like that. So yeah.
Brilliant. Zana says it isn't a crazy conspiracy theory. Driver behind initiative send digital devices to Africa. It's to control the educational. Huberta says money, effing money. Susie is back from New Zealand, and she says that what you're describing even is exactly what is being proposed for New Zealand charter schools there. Sean Hinchcliffe on Twitter says academies are factory farms for our kids. In my day, we were encouraged to answer questions and to think for ourselves. We were encouraged to even ask questions and think for ourselves. Huge interest. I'm so delighted at the interest in this, because this is not unique to Britain. This is going on all over the world, isn't it?
Yeah, well, like I said, when was it? Like I first came on your show about 18 months ago, something like that. Yeah,
just after we started,
and that was, and we talked about the global education reform movement, and you can see how it's spreading now all the way across, all throughout all these different countries.
Mandated testing, Sian. This is obviously, these mandated testings for for children very, 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 very young. This is all
don't
part
get
of
me
this.
started on that,
Yeah,
Rich.
yeah. We could be here all night on
That's
that.
a whole other show, that one. But I must say, I'm really, really pleased to say that we have beaten the baseline assessment. So I've been campaigning. Well, we've been campaigning for about a year now on getting rid of the test for 4-year-olds, the 4 too young to test campaign, and they have finally did a U-turn on it about 2 weeks ago. So we're very pleased to say that that has been kicked into the long grass, and as of September, these children will not be tested at 4 years old.
Which is massive, isn't it? Here's a great question from Sean. He says he's sure there's a link. What does Sian think of the Named Person Act? I'll briefly describe it. Coming in August in Scotland, every child in Scotland will have a named person. That person will be a teacher or a local person of note. Could be a minister, could be a priest, could be anybody who's a named person who will kind of keep an eye on the well-being of the child growing up and will be there if the parents need any assistance. But kind of more in a more sinister way, they will also be there to, I suppose, to report on the family to Child Protective Services or the social services. It is absolutely terrifying what's happening.
I think this came up on that same question came up last time I was on, and it had just been announced, I think, that day. So we didn't really know much about it.
You'd be asked to be a named person, somebody like you. You're a teacher.
Probably, yeah. But I don't want to be a named person. I've got my own kids and family to look after, and I've got my own classes at school to look after. I don't want to take on any additional responsibility for anybody else. And apart from that, it's none of my business. This is the nanny state, isn't it? I mean, this truly is the definition of a nanny state. And if I was people in Scotland, I would be campaigning absolutely vociferously against that.
I think it's coming in, Sian, regardless. I think it's being passed and it's going to come in, and that's the way it's going to be. And I'm not hearing very much from Scottish people on it.
No, I haven't. So whether they've just accepted it, I don't know. I haven't heard that there's been any uproar about it. But no, I certainly would not want that in England.
You've I think we've only met the one time personally, but you've been on the radio show a few times, and I follow you on social media, on Facebook and stuff. It's fair to say that you go down roads in terms of what you think this is really all about that maybe some of your colleagues wouldn't do. I really admire you for that, though, because like your colleagues whom they might know or they might not know that you listen to programs like this, or that you might read something by Jim Marrs or by David Icke or whatever. You do really see the sinister side of this, don't you? You see the control aspect of it, the tyranny of it.
Yeah. I've had my eyes opened, and I can see where this is going, and it's exactly what David described. It's the totalitarian tiptoe, and if this is the first stages, and if schools are being scared into making that conversion into becoming academies now, remember, this white paper isn't law yet, so there's no need for these schools to be panicking and forming multi-academy trusts and becoming academies. It hasn't been made law, but the government is scaring them into making that jump before it becomes law. So this is the first step in that tiptoe. And once they've got them to become academies, then they have total say over what happens to that school. They can then bring in multi-academy trusts and say, right, they can just name what schools they want to have in their multi-academy trust. So they can just cherry pick them, they can pick them off, and no one will have any say in it. There will be no choice, and it will just happen. And so, it is the first step. And we've got to be careful. Once this happens, there is no going back. People
need to wake up to it. Sian, we'll leave it there for now. Is there an online resource that you want to give people where they can find more about it?
Yeah, there's absolutely loads. I just wanted to just finish up with one thing and saying that we as the NUT, think that this government has got its priorities all wrong over education, not just over this white paper, but we have some massive issues going on at the moment with teacher recruitment and retention. 50,000 teachers left last year because they've had enough of what's going on. They're moving abroad, or they're getting ill with stress and anxiety and having to leave. We've got a pupil places crisis. There aren't enough schools, and with this academies built, the government won't allow local authorities to build any schools or expand any schools because they won't give them money to do it unless they become an academy. So it's like blackmail. So a friend of mine I was talking to the other day was saying she's got 42 in her class in September, which is just ridiculous. So we've got increasing class sizes, we've got the funding cuts for schools, and we've got all this chaos in testing and assessment. So they should be sorting all of that out before making this academisation programme happen.
Well, we know the reason they're doing it. We know the reason they're doing it goes beyond that. It goes beyond any logic. So give us a quick online resource then for people that they can log on to, and then we'll leave it for now.
Okay, so if you, in fact, what they can just do is Google national 10 realities, and that will bring you up with, there's a fantastic document that the NUT has produced, debunking all the myths that are claimed about academies. So there's a list of 10 myths that the DFE brought out the other day, with no evidence to back up what they were saying. So the NUT has gone through every single one and has provided evidence to rebut every single one of those points. So that's a brilliant resource there. Or you can just put in National Union of Teachers white paper, and there's all sorts of resources on there as well.
Sian, brilliant to talk to you again. We'll talk again on this real soon. Lovely to chat with you. Look after yourself.
Yeah, and you, Rich. Thanks ever so much. Speak soon.
Anytime at all. It's too serious, this. Sian Bloor on the line to us there from Trafford in Greater Manchester.